German Shepherd, was chained to an overflowing dumpster, left to die. What the baby did left everyone in tears. What you're about to listen to will break your heart, then mend it in ways you never thought possible. This story of an abandoned German Shepherd and a 4-year-old boy will leave you in tears. Drop a comment to let us know where you're watching from. Thunder crashed outside the window of the tiny apartment, illuminating the cramped living room for a split second before plunging it back into darkness. 4-year-old Elias pressed his small face against the cold glass, his breath creating foggy circles that expanded and contracted with each exhale. His eyes followed the raindrops racing down the window, his tiny finger tracing their paths until they disappeared at the bottom of the pane. "Elias, sweetie, it's way past your bedtime," Sophie called from the kitchen, where she was sorting through a stack of past-due bills. Her voice was tired, strained from the weight of raising a child alone in a neighborhood that had seen better days. Elias didn't move. Something had caught his attention, something beyond the racing raindrops and flashes of lightning. "Mama," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the storm. "Someone is crying outside." Sophie sighed, setting down the electric bill she'd been staring at for the past 10 minutes. Her son had always had an active imagination, especially during storms. "It's just the wind, baby. Nothing to worry about." She crossed the small living room and knelt beside him, gently brushing his dark curls away from his forehead. "The storm is making all kinds of scary noises tonight. That's why you need to be tucked in your warm bed." Elias turned to look at her, his blue eyes wide and serious. "No, Mama, it's not the wind. Someone is crying. Listen." Sophie paused, humoring her son. She heard the howling wind, the rain lashing against the windows, the occasional rumble of thunder, but nothing that sounded like crying. "Come on, sweetie, time for bed." She scooped him up, his small body feeling lighter than it should for a 4-year-old. They'd been cutting corners with food lately. Sophie pushed away the guilt that threatened to overwhelm her and carried him to his small bedroom. "But Mama," Elias protested as she tucked him under his thin, worn blanket. "No buts," Sophie interrupted gently, smoothing his blanket. "The storm will be gone by morning, and you need your sleep. I'll leave your door open a crack so you can call me if you get scared." She kissed his forehead and turned to leave, but Elias grabbed her hand with surprising strength. "The crying won't stop, Mama. Someone needs help." Sophie looked down at her son, at the tears brimming in his eyes, and felt her heart twist. "It's the wind, baby. I promise. Now try to sleep." She gently extracted her hand from his grip and left the room, leaving the door open a few inches as promised. Back in the living room, she collapsed onto the worn couch, running her hands through her hair. The bills wouldn't pay themselves, and her shift at the diner started at 6 a.m. In his bedroom, Elias lay rigid under his blanket, eyes wide open in the darkness. The crying hadn't stopped. If anything, it sounded weaker now, more desperate. He gripped his blanket tightly, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. The voice in his head told him to stay in bed, to listen to his mother, but his heart pulled him toward the window. He slipped out from under his blanket, his small feet barely making a sound as they touched the cold floor. The crying grew fainter with each passing minute. Whatever was making that sound was giving up. Elias glanced toward his bedroom door. His mother would be angry if she caught him out of bed. But the crying, it sounded so sad, so lost. Someone needed help, and no one was listening. Making his decision, he padded silently to his window, and, with some effort, pushed it open. The rain immediately spattered against his face, cold and shocking. The fire escape outside his window was rusted and dangerous. His mother had forbidden him from ever using it, but the crying was coming from the alley below. With a determination that belied his 4 years, Elias climbed carefully out the window. The metal of the fire escape was slippery with rain, and his pajamas were soaked in seconds. The wind whipped around him, threatening to knock his small body off balance, but he clung to the railing and made his way down, one careful step at a time. His bare feet finally touched the wet asphalt of the alley, and he shivered violently in his soaked pajamas. The crying was clearer now, coming from further down the narrow passage between buildings. Elias followed the sound, his heart pounding in his chest. The alley was dark, lit only by the occasional flash of lightning. Garbage overflowed from dumpsters, and broken glass crunched under his feet. He should have worn shoes, he realized too late. But he couldn't go back now. The crying was getting weaker. "Hello?" Elias called, his voice small and frightened. "Are you hurt? I came to help." Another flash of lightning illuminated the alley, and Elias gasped at what he saw. At the end of the alley, chained to an overflowing dumpster, was a dog, a German shepherd, once powerful and majestic, now reduced to skin and bones. The dog's fur was matted with blood and dirt, and open wounds covered its emaciated body. A heavy chain was wrapped tightly around its neck, secured to the dumpster with a thick padlock. The metal had rubbed the dog's neck raw, leaving a bloody, infected collar of flesh. Elias froze, his heart breaking at the sight. The dog's eyes, once proud and bright, were now dull and lifeless, sunken into its skull. It lay in a puddle of filthy water and its own waste, too weak to even hold its head up. As Elias approached slowly, the dog's tail moved, just a slight twitch, but it was something. The crying sound he'd heard was the dog's weak whimpering, now barely audible even up close. "Hi," Elias whispered, kneeling in the filth beside the dog, oblivious to the garbage and broken glass surrounding them. "I heard you crying. I came to help." The dog's eyes, clouded with pain and resignation, shifted slightly to look at the small boy. There was no fear in them, no hope, just a deep exhaustion. This was an animal that had given up. Flies buzzed around the dog's wounds, landing on its eyes only to be weakly blinked away. Its ribs were clearly visible through its skin, and its stomach was sunken so deeply that Elias could see the curve of its spine from the side. This dog hadn't eaten in days, maybe weeks. "You're hurt," Elias whispered, tears filling his eyes. "Who did this to you?" The dog made no response. Its breathing was shallow and labored, each breath seeming to require tremendous effort. Tentatively, Elias reached out his small hand. The dog didn't move, didn't even flinch as the boy's fingers gently touched its face. Its fur, where it wasn't matted with blood, was coarse and filthy. At the touch of the child's hand, the dog let out a faint whimper, not of fear or pain, but something else, something that sounded almost like relief. Then, with what seemed to be the last of its strength, the dog lifted its head just slightly and licked Elias's hand, once, twice, before its head sank back down to the wet pavement. The gesture broke something inside Elias. Tears spilled freely down his cheeks, mixing with the rain on his face. This dog wasn't just hurt, it was dying. Right here, in this alley, chained to a dumpster like it was garbage. "I won't leave you," Elias promised, his voice catching on a sob. "I won't leave you all alone." He looked at the chain, at the heavy padlock securing it to the dumpster. There was no way his small hands could break it, no way he could free the dog on his own. But he couldn't leave it here to die in the cold and the rain. The storm grew more violent, rain driving down in sheets so thick that Elias could barely see. Thunder boomed directly overhead, making him jump, but he didn't run. Instead, he lay down in the filth beside the dying dog, wrapping his small arms around its neck, careful to avoid the worst of its wounds. "I'll keep you warm," he whispered, pressing his face into the dog's dirty fur. "I'll stay with you. You won't be alone anymore." The dog's body trembled, whether from cold or pain, or simply the shock of human contact after what must have been a long period of abuse and neglect. Elias couldn't tell, but he held on tighter, sharing what little warmth his small body could provide. "My name is Elias," he whispered into the dog's ear. "What's your name?" The dog, of course, didn't answer, but its tail twitched again, a tiny, almost imperceptible movement. "That's okay. Mama says I talk enough for two anyway." Elias tried to smile through his tears. "I'm 4 years old. How old are you? You look big, but not as big as Mrs. Peterson's dog from downstairs. But I bet you're a lot nicer." As he spoke, his small voice just audible over the storm, the dog's breathing seemed to steady slightly. Its eyes remained fixed on the boy's face, as if it couldn't quite believe what was happening. "You're a good dog," Elias continued, stroking the dirty fur gently. "A good, brave dog, the very best dog in the whole world. And I'm going to help you, I promise." Another flash of lightning, another crash of thunder. The storm showed no signs of letting up, but Elias didn't care. He would stay here all night if he had to. This dog needed him, and he wouldn't let it down. In his apartment, Elias had a stuffed dog, a German shepherd, just like this one, though his toy was plush and clean and whole, not broken and dying. His father had given it to him before he left. Sometimes when he was scared or sad, Elias would hold that toy close and imagine it was protecting him. Now it was his turn to protect. "Did someone hurt you?" he asked softly, noticing for the first time that some of the wounds on the dog's body seemed intentional, not the result of neglect, but of deliberate cruelty. The thought made his stomach hurt. That was wrong. No one should hurt dogs, or kids, or anyone. The dog's eyes drifted closed, then opened again, with visible effort. Its breathing was growing more labored, each breath a struggle. Panic seized Elias. The dog was slipping away. "No, please don't go to sleep," he begged, his voice rising. "Please stay awake. My mama will help you. She can fix anything. Please." He wrapped his arms more firmly around the dog's neck, as if he could physically keep its life from slipping away. "Please," he sobbed. "Please don't die." The dog's eyes found his again, and in them, Elias saw something change, a tiny spark where before there had been none. With tremendous effort, the dog lifted its head and licked the boy's cheek, catching his tears. It was at that moment that Sophie's scream cut through the storm. "Elias! Oh my God! Elias!" She stood at the entrance to the alley, her hair plastered to her head from the rain, her face contorted with panic and fear. She'd woken to check on him, found his bed empty, his window open to the storm. The sight of her 4-year-old son lying in filth next to a dying, possibly dangerous dog was almost more than her heart could take. "Elias, come here right now!" she screamed, running toward him, splashing through puddles, heedless of the broken glass and garbage. "Mama!" Elias cried, not moving from the dog's side. "Mama, he's dying! He needs me!" Sophie reached them, dropping to her knees beside her son. "Elias, get away from it. It could be sick. It could hurt you." "No, Mama," Elias sobbed, clinging to the dog's neck. "He's good. He's a good dog. Someone hurt him and left him here to die. He licked my hand, Mama. He knows I'm trying to help." Sophie opened her mouth to argue, to drag her son away from the filthy, dying animal. But then she really looked at it. At the deliberate wounds, the chain embedded in its flesh, the resignation in its eyes as it gazed up at her. This wasn't a dangerous stray. This was a victim. "Please, Mama," Elias begged, his blue eyes wide and pleading, tears streaming down his face to mix with the rain. "Please, he's dying. He needs me." Sophie's heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. How could she say no to those eyes? How could she teach her son compassion and then deny him the chance to show it? But a dying dog, their apartment was tiny. They could barely afford food for themselves, let alone veterinary care for a severely injured animal. But the dog's eyes met hers, and something passed between them, a recognition perhaps of two beings who had seen too much hardship. The dog's gaze seemed to say, "I understand if you leave me. Everyone else has." With tears in her eyes, Sophie made her decision. "Okay," she whispered, barely audible over the storm. "Okay, baby, we'll help him." Relief flooded Elias's face. "Really, Mama? We can take him home?" Sophie nodded, already looking at the chain, trying to figure out how to free the dog. "Yes, we'll take him home. But, Elias, he's very sick. I don't know if—" She stopped herself. There was no need to prepare her son for the dog's death just yet. First, they had to try to save it. "He'll be okay," Elias said with absolute certainty. "I promised him." Sophie examined the padlock securing the chain to the dumpster. It was heavy and rusted, impossible to break without tools. She looked around desperately, then spotted a piece of metal pipe half buried in garbage nearby. "Stay with him," she told Elias, though there was clearly no danger of her son leaving the dog's side. She retrieved the pipe and, after several attempts, managed to slide it through the links of the chain near where it attached to the dumpster. Using the pipe as leverage, she strained against the chain with all her strength. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a groan of protest, one of the links gave way, weakened by rust and exposure to the elements. The chain came free, though the portion wrapped around the dog's neck remained secured by the padlock. "We did it!" Elias cried, his face lighting up, despite the grim situation. "Now he can come home with us." Sophie looked down at the emaciated dog, wondering how they were going to transport it. It was clearly too weak to walk, and though it was severely underweight, it was still a large breed. She wasn't sure she could carry it all the way back to their apartment. As if sensing her dilemma, the dog tried to stand. Its legs trembled violently with the effort, and after a moment, it collapsed back to the ground. "Don't try to get up," Elias whispered, stroking the dog's head. "Mama will carry you." Sophie took a deep breath. She had no choice. This was important to her son, and she wouldn't let him down. "Okay," she said, positioning herself beside the dog. "Elias, I need you to move back a little so I can lift him." Reluctantly, Elias released his hold on the dog and stepped back. Sophie carefully slid her arms under the dog's body, flinching at how prominent its bones were beneath her fingers. "It's okay," she murmured to the dog as it whimpered softly. "We're going to help you." With a grunt of effort, she lifted the dog into her arms. It weighed far less than it should have, which only confirmed how severe its starvation was. The dog went limp in her arms, too weak to struggle or resist. "Let's go home," Sophie said to Elias, who was watching with wide, anxious eyes. "Quickly, before the storm gets worse." They made their way back through the alley, Sophie struggling to keep her balance on the slick pavement while carrying the dog. Elias walked beside her, one small hand clutching the edge of her soaked nightgown, the other reaching up to keep contact with the dog, as if he feared it might disappear if he let go. "Don't worry," he kept whispering to the dog. "We're taking you home. You're safe now." Sophie didn't have the heart to tell him that safe might be an overstatement. The dog was barely clinging to life, and they had no resources to care for it properly. But they would try. For Elias's sake, they would try. As they approached their building, Sophie realized they couldn't use the fire escape to return to their apartment. Not with her carrying the dog and Elias so small and the metal slick with rain. They would have to use the main entrance and hope none of their neighbors saw them bringing a dying animal into the building. Luck was with them. The lobby was deserted at this late hour, and they made it to the elevator without being seen. Sophie shifted the dog's weight in her arms, her muscles burning with the effort of carrying it. The dog's breathing had become more labored during the journey, its eyes closed, its body limp. "Is he okay, Mama?" Elias asked, his voice small and frightened. Sophie couldn't lie to him. "I don't know, baby. He's very sick, but we're going to do everything we can to help him." The elevator doors opened, and they hurried down the hallway to their apartment. Once inside, Sophie gently laid the dog on the living room floor. It didn't move, didn't even open its eyes. Only the slight rise and fall of its chest indicated that it was still alive. Elias immediately knelt beside it, his small hands hovering uncertainly over its broken body. "What do we do now, Mama?" Sophie looked at the dog, at its many wounds, at the chain still wrapped around its neck. They needed to clean it, treat its injuries, get it warm and dry. But first, they needed to remove that chain. "I'll get some tools," she said, moving to the small closet where she kept a basic toolkit. "And some towels. We need to dry him off and clean his wounds." While she gathered supplies, Elias sat vigil beside the dog, whispering to it continuously. "You're safe now. This is our home. No one will hurt you here. My mama will make you better. She can fix anything." Sophie returned with towels, a bowl of warm water, hydrogen peroxide, and the small toolkit. She knelt beside the dog and examined the padlock on the chain. After several attempts with different tools, she managed to force it open with a screwdriver and a hammer. Carefully, she unwound the chain from around the dog's neck, gasping at the raw, infected wound it had left behind. The metal had worn away fur and skin, exposing flesh that was now inflamed and oozing. "Oh, you poor thing," she murmured, feeling a surge of anger at whoever had done this. "Who could do something like this to you?" Elias watched with wide, tearful eyes as Sophie gently cleaned the wound with warm water. The dog flinched but didn't struggle, either too weak to resist or somehow understanding that they were trying to help. "We need to clean all his wounds," Sophie explained to Elias, handing him a clean, damp towel. "Can you very gently wipe the dirt from his fur while I take care of the bad cuts?" Elias nodded solemnly, taking the towel and beginning to carefully clean the dog's face. The dog's eyes opened at his touch, focusing on the boy with what seemed like recognition. "See, Mama, he knows me," Elias said, his voice filled with wonder. "He knows I found him." Sophie smiled sadly, continuing to clean and disinfect the worst of the dog's wounds. There were so many. Cuts, abrasions, what looked like burns in some places. This animal had suffered deliberate, prolonged abuse before being left to die. As they worked, the dog's breathing became slightly less labored, and it began to respond more to their touches, turning its head toward Elias's hands when he spoke. It was still critically weak, but perhaps the gentle care was giving it a reason to keep fighting. "Mama, he needs food," Elias said, his face serious. "His tummy is all gone. Look." Sophie looked at the dog's sunken stomach and nodded. "You're right. But we have to be careful. When someone hasn't eaten for a long time, they can get sicker if they eat too much at once." She went to the kitchen, searching through their meager supplies for something appropriate for a starving dog. They had eggs, some milk, a bit of chicken left over from their dinner. She decided on the chicken, shredding it into tiny pieces and adding a small amount of water to make it easier to eat. When she returned with the bowl, Elias was lying next to the dog, his small body curled around its much larger one, his arm draped gently over its shoulder. He was whispering something in the dog's ear, words Sophie couldn't quite catch. "I brought some food," she said, kneeling beside them. "Let's see if he'll eat a little." Elias sat up eagerly. "Did you hear that? Mama brought you food. You need to eat to get strong again." Sophie placed the bowl near the dog's muzzle, but it didn't react. Its eyes were open, watching them, but it made no move toward the food. "Maybe he can't sit up," Elias suggested. "Can we help him?" Together, they gently supported the dog's head, raising it slightly from the floor. Sophie brought a small piece of chicken to its mouth, but the dog still didn't respond. Elias's face fell. "Why won't he eat, Mama?" "He wants to go to sleep forever." Sophie fought back tears at her son's perceptive words. The dog had given up. After who knew how long suffering abuse, starvation, and abandonment, it had simply lost the will to live. "Not if we can help it," she said firmly, both to Elias and to the dog. "We're not giving up on you, so you can't give up on yourself." She took another piece of chicken and held it directly under the dog's nose, letting the aroma reach it. This time, its nostrils flared slightly. Its eyes focused on the food, and its tongue, dry and cracked, darted out to lick its lips. "That's it," Sophie encouraged. "Just try a little." Slowly, hesitantly, the dog opened its mouth and took the piece of chicken from her fingers. It chewed weakly and swallowed, then looked up at them as if awaiting their reaction. Elias clapped his hands in delight. "He ate it, Mama!" "He ate it." Sophie smiled, her heart lifting slightly. "Yes, he did. Good boy," she added to the dog, offering another small piece. The dog accepted it, then another, and another. Sophie was careful to feed it slowly, just a little at a time, knowing that too much food could shock its system after such prolonged starvation. After eating a small amount, the dog's eyes began to droop with exhaustion. The simple act of eating seemed to have drained what little energy it had. "Let him rest now," Sophie told Elias, setting aside the remaining food. "He needs to sleep to heal." Elias nodded, then ran to his bedroom. He returned moments later with his pillow and blanket. Without a word, he placed the pillow gently under the dog's head and spread the blanket over its body. "There," he said, satisfied. "Now he'll be warm and comfy." Sophie looked at her son, this tiny, compassionate being who had braved a storm to save a dying animal, and felt overwhelmed with love and pride. "You have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever known," she whispered, pulling him into a hug. Elias hugged her back, then broke away to kneel beside the dog again. "I'm going to stay with him," he announced, "all night, so he knows he's not alone anymore." Sophie should have insisted he go to bed, should have reminded him of school tomorrow, of the need for sleep. But looking at the determination on his small face, she couldn't bring herself to separate him from the dog he'd risked so much to save. "Okay," she agreed, "but try to get some sleep too." Elias nodded, already settling himself on the floor beside the dog, one hand resting gently on its side to feel the rise and fall of its breathing. Sophie watched them for a moment, her son and this broken animal that had somehow found its way into their lives, then went to make coffee. It would be a long night, and she needed to stay awake to monitor the dog's condition. As she waited for the coffee to brew, she looked back at Elias and the dog. Her son's eyes were already drooping, his small body exhausted from the night's events, but his hand remained on the dog's side, keeping that vital connection. The dog's eyes were open, watching Elias with an expression Sophie could only describe as wonder, as if it couldn't quite believe that this small human had found it, had cared enough to save it. Then, as she watched, the dog's tail moved. Just a slight wag, but unmistakable. And for the first time, Sophie allowed herself to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, this dog might survive the night. Elias stirred slightly, opening his sleepy eyes to look at the dog. "I'll call you Hero," he whispered, "because I know you are." The dog's tail wagged again, stronger this time. And as Elias's eyes drifted closed, his hand still resting protectively on Hero's side, the newly named dog did something remarkable. It shifted slightly, painfully, to move closer to the sleeping child. Then, it laid its head down beside Elias's, their breaths mingling in the quiet of the night. Sophie felt tears pricking her eyes at the sight. Whatever happened tomorrow, whether the dog survived or not, her son had done something beautiful tonight. He had heard a cry no one else could hear, and he had answered it with pure, unflinching love. The storm raged on outside, but inside the tiny apartment, something fragile had begun to take root. A bond between a broken dog and a boy with a heart too big for his small body. Neither Sophie nor Elias could have imagined how this night would change their lives forever. Dawn broke over the city, pale light filtering through the worn curtains of Sophie's apartment. She hadn't slept a wink, keeping vigil over both her son and the dog they'd rescued. Elias had finally succumbed to exhaustion around 3 a.m., his small body curled protectively around Hero, one hand still resting on the dog's side. Sophie rubbed her tired eyes and checked the time. 5:30 a.m. Her shift at the diner started in 30 minutes, but there was no way she could leave Elias alone with a severely injured dog. She'd have to call in sick, risking her job in the process. But what choice did she have? As she reached for her phone, Elias stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Mama?" he mumbled sleepily. "Is Hero still here?" "Yes, baby," Sophie whispered. "He's still with us." Elias turned to look at the dog and broke into a wide smile. "He's breathing better, Mama." "Look." Sophie knelt beside them, and to her surprise, she saw that Elias was right. Hero's breathing had become deeper and more regular overnight. His eyes, though still clouded with pain, seemed slightly more alert as they tracked her movements. "Good morning, Hero," Elias said, gently stroking the dog's head. "Did you sleep good? We're going to make you all better today." Sophie's heart clenched at her son's innocent optimism. The dog was still in critical condition, its wounds severe, its body ravaged by starvation. They needed professional help they couldn't afford. "Elias, I need to make a phone call," she said. "I'm going to stay home with you and Hero today." Elias's face lit up. "Really, Mama? You don't have to go to work." "Not today," Sophie confirmed, already dialing the diner's number. Her boss answered on the third ring, his voice gruff with sleep. "Tom, it's Sophie. I'm so sorry, but I can't come in today. My son is—" She hesitated, not wanting to lie, but knowing the truth would sound absurd. "He's not well. I need to stay home with him." There was a long pause on the other end. "This is the third time this month, Sophie," Tom said finally, his voice hard. "You know the policy." Sophie closed her eyes, her stomach sinking. "I know. I'm sorry. It's just, if you're not here by 6, don't bother coming back at all." The line went dead. Sophie stared at her phone, tears welling in her eyes. She'd just lost her job, the job that barely kept a roof over their heads and food on their table. "Mama?" Elias's voice was small and worried. "Are you crying?" Sophie quickly wiped her eyes and forced a smile. "No, baby. I'm just tired. Let's check on Hero, okay?" She knelt beside the dog, gently removing the blanket to examine its wounds in the morning light. Some of the smaller cuts had begun to scab over, but the deeper ones, especially the raw circle around its neck, still looked angry and inflamed. "We need to clean these again," she told Elias, "and try to get him to eat a little more." As they tended to Hero's wounds, the dog seemed more responsive than the night before. It flinched at their touch, but didn't pull away, and its eyes followed their every movement. When Sophie offered it some more chicken, it ate with slightly more enthusiasm, though still slowly and carefully. "See, he's getting better," Elias exclaimed, his face glowing with happiness. Sophie wished she could share his certainty. The dog was fighting, yes, but it needed antibiotics for its infections, proper nutrition to combat the starvation, and possibly surgery for some of its deeper wounds, none of which they could provide. A sharp knock at the door made them both jump. Hero's reaction was immediate. A low growl rumbled from its throat, and it tried to push itself up on trembling legs. "Shh, it's okay," Elias soothed, placing a gentle hand on the dog's shoulder. "No one will hurt you here." Sophie approached the door cautiously. They rarely had visitors, especially this early in the morning. Looking through the peephole, she saw a man she didn't recognize, tall, rugged, with a weathered face and sharp eyes. "Who is it?" she called through the door, keeping her voice steady despite her unease. "Name's Owen," the man replied. "I'm looking for a dog, German Shepherd. Been told it might be in this building." Sophie's blood ran cold. Was this the person who had abused Hero and left him to die? Had someone seen them bringing the dog into the building last night? "There's no dog here," she lied, her hand reaching for the chain lock to make sure it was secured. "Ma'am, I've been tracking this dog for days," the man insisted. "I'm a retired K-9 officer. The dog is dangerous and needs to be returned to its handler." Behind her, Sophie heard Hero's growl intensify, though it was still weak. Elias whispered to the dog, trying to calm it. "I told you, there's no dog here," Sophie repeated, her voice harder now. "Please leave." There was a pause then. "I heard a growl, ma'am. I know the dog is in there. I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm trying to help." Sophie hesitated, torn between fear of this stranger and the possibility that he might actually be able to help Hero. If he was truly a retired K-9 officer, he might have connections to veterinarians, resources they desperately needed. "Mama?" Elias called from behind her. "Hero's scared." The man outside must have heard him. "You've named him Hero? That's good. That's what he is. A hero. Please, let me see him. I promise I'm not here to take him back to the people who hurt him." Something in the man's voice, a raw sincerity, made Sophie's decision for her. She unlocked the door, but kept the chain in place, opening it just enough to see the man's face clearly. "How do I know I can trust you?" she demanded. Owen reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out a worn badge, holding it up for her to see. 20 years with the K-9 unit, retired last spring. I've been tracking cases of police dogs being abused by their handlers. Hero is one of them. Sophie studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. Finding none, she closed the door, removed the chain, and opened it again. Owen stepped inside, his eyes immediately finding Hero and Elias on the living room floor. His face darkened at the sight of the dog's condition. "Jesus," he muttered, approaching slowly. "They did a number on you, didn't they, boy?" Hero's growl subsided as Owen knelt a few feet away, making no move to touch the dog. Instead, he spoke softly, his voice taking on a soothing cadence that seemed to calm the animal. "You know him?" Sophie asked, hovering protectively near Elias. Owen nodded grimly. "Not personally, but I know his story. He was part of a new training program, showed incredible promise, intelligence, loyalty, all the right instincts, until they started the attack training." "Attack training?" Sophie echoed, glancing at Hero, who was watching Owen with wary eyes. "They train K-9S to bring down suspects on command," Owen explained. "But Hero wouldn't do it. He'd chase, he'd corner, but he wouldn't bite. Not even the padded training suits. He just wouldn't hurt people." Elias looked up at this, his eyes wide. "Because he's good," he said simply. Owen's weathered face softened as he looked at the boy. "That's right, kid. He is good. Too good for the job they wanted him to do." "So, they did this to him?" Sophie asked, her voice shaking with anger. "Beat him, starved him, and left him to die because he wouldn't attack people?" Owen's jaw tightened. His handler, Carter, has a reputation for fixing difficult dogs. His methods are extreme. When Hero still wouldn't comply, Carter likely decided to make an example of him. Discard him like trash to show the other handlers what happens to failures. Elias's face crumpled at these words, and he buried it in Hero's fur, his small shoulders shaking with sobs. "Why did they hurt him, Mama? He's good." Sophie knelt beside her son, pulling him into her arms. "Because some people don't deserve love," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They don't understand goodness when they see it." Elias pulled back from her embrace, his tear-stained face suddenly fierce. "Then we'll love him extra," he declared. "We'll love him enough to make up for all the meanness." Owen watched this exchange with something like respect dawning in his eyes. "You're a brave kid," he told Elias. "Not many adults would have done what you did." "How did you find us?" Sophie asked, still not entirely sure she could trust this man. "I've been monitoring police frequencies," Owen explained. "Last night, someone reported a woman and child carrying a large dog into this building. Given the area and the description, I thought it might be the dog I've been looking for." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small first aid kit. "I brought some supplies, antibiotics, proper bandages, some high-calorie food supplement for severely malnourished dogs. May I?" Sophie nodded cautiously, and Owen moved closer to Hero, speaking to the dog in that same calm, reassuring voice. To her surprise, Hero didn't growl or try to move away. Instead, he watched Owen with cautious acceptance as the man began examining his wounds more thoroughly than Sophie had been able to. "The neck wound is the worst," Owen said, gently probing the raw flesh where the chain had been. "It's infected, but not as badly as I feared. The antibiotics should help with that." He looked up at Sophie. "You did a good job cleaning these wounds. You might have saved his life." "It was Elias who saved him," Sophie corrected, squeezing her son's shoulder. "He heard him crying when no one else could." Owen looked at the boy with newfound respect. "You've got special ears, kid, and a special heart." Elias beamed at the praise, then his face grew serious again. "Can you help Hero stand up? He's too weak." "Let's see what we can do," Owen said, carefully applying antibiotic ointment to Hero's wounds and wrapping the worst ones in clean bandages. Then he took out a syringe and a small bottle. "This is an antibiotic," he explained to Elias. "It will help fight the infection so Hero can get stronger." Elias watched wide-eyed as Owen administered the injection with practiced ease. Hero barely reacted, his eyes fixed on Elias as if drawing strength from the boy's presence. "Now, let's try to get him to eat something more substantial," Owen said, taking out a tube of what looked like paste. "This is specially formulated for dogs who are severely malnourished. It has all the nutrients he needs to start regaining his strength." He squeezed some of the paste onto his finger and offered it to Hero. The dog sniffed it cautiously, then licked it from Owen's finger. He continued feeding Hero small amounts until the dog turned his head away, indicating he'd had enough. "Good boy," Owen praised. "That's enough for now. We'll give him more in a few hours." "Will he be able to stand?" Elias asked anxiously. Owen considered the question. "Let's give it a try, but don't be disappointed if he can't just yet. He's very weak." Together, they gently positioned themselves on either side of Hero, supporting his weight. With their help, the dog struggled to his feet, his legs trembling violently with the effort. "That's it," Owen encouraged. "You can do it, boy." Hero stood for perhaps 5 seconds before his legs gave out, and he collapsed back to the floor. Elias's face fell, and he looked close to tears again. "Hey, that was great for a first try," Owen said quickly. "Much better than I expected, honestly. He's a fighter." "Like me," Elias said proudly. "Mama says I'm small but mighty." Owen chuckled. "Your mama's right about that." Sophie, who had been watching this interaction carefully, finally allowed herself to relax slightly. Owen seemed genuinely concerned for Hero, and his medical knowledge was clearly helping, but there was still the matter of her lost job, their precarious financial situation, and the question of what would happen to Hero once he recovered. "What happens now?" she asked Owen. "To Hero, I mean." Owen's face darkened. "Carter will be looking for him, not because he wants him back, but because he doesn't want evidence of his cruelty walking around. If Hero recovers and someone connects him to Carter, they'll try to take him away?" Elias asked, his voice small and frightened. Owen hesitated, clearly not wanting to scare the child. "They might try," he admitted finally, "but we won't let that happen." "Promise?" Elias demanded, his blue eyes intense. "I promise, kid," Owen said solemnly. "I've been building a case against Carter for months. Hero could be the evidence that finally brings him down." Sophie wasn't sure how to feel about this. On one hand, bringing a criminal to justice seemed right. On the other, it put her son in potential danger. "We should get him to a vet," Owen continued, changing the subject. "I can help with the basics, but he needs a proper examination, maybe some fluids." Sophie's heart sank. "We can't afford a vet," she admitted. "And I just lost my job because I couldn't go in this morning." Owen's eyebrows rose. "You missed work to care for a dog you found in an alley?" "For Hero," Elias corrected firmly. "His name is Hero." Owen smiled slightly. For Hero, he agreed. That's something special, ma'am. Sophie, she corrected. And this is Elias. Well, Sophie and Elias, I might be able to help with the vet situation. I know someone who works at a clinic across town. She helps me with the abused K9 cases I track. She might be willing to see Hero for free. Hope bloomed in Sophie's chest, but she tamped it down quickly. Why would you help us? You don't even know us. Owen looked at Hero, his expression softening. Because this dog deserved better than what he got. Because your son was brave enough to save him when adults who should have known better turned a blind eye. And because I've seen too many good dogs destroyed by bad people. He reached out and gently stroked Hero's head. The dog leaned into his touch, a small gesture of trust that brought tears to Sophie's eyes. Let me make a call, Owen said, standing up and taking out his phone. He stepped into the kitchen to make the call, speaking in low tones that Sophie couldn't quite make out. While he was gone, Elias whispered to Hero, "Did you hear that? You're going to see a special doctor who will make you all better." Hero's tail thumped weakly against the floor, once, twice. It was the strongest response they had seen from him yet. Owen returned a few minutes later, his face cautiously optimistic. My friend Lisa can see him this afternoon. She's clearing her schedule, but we need to figure out how to transport him. He's too weak to walk, and I don't think he'd do well on public transportation. We could carry him again, Sophie suggested, though the thought of carrying the large dog all the way across town was daunting. I have a better idea, Owen said. I have a friend with a car who owes me a favor. Let me make another call. This time when he returned, he was smiling. Transportation's arranged. They'll be here in an hour. In the meantime, let's try to get Hero to drink some water and maybe eat a little more. They took turns offering Hero small sips of water from a shallow bowl. The dog's paws shook so much that he spilled most of it, soaking the blanket beneath him. It's okay, Elias soothed, gently wiping the water from Hero's face with his small hands. You're trying your best. As if in response, Hero slowly lifted his paw and placed it on Elias's lap. The gesture was so deliberate, so clearly intentional that Sophie gasped. Mama, did you see that? Elias exclaimed, his face alight with joy. He put his paw on me. Owen nodded solemnly. That's a big deal. It's the first sign of trust. He's choosing to touch you, to connect with you. Elias beamed, carefully placing his small hand over Hero's paw. I trust you too, Hero, he whispered, and I'll never ever hurt you. The hour passed quickly as they continued to care for Hero, cleaning his wounds again, offering him water and small amounts of food, and simply sitting with him, talking softly and letting him grow accustomed to gentle human contact. When a knock came at the door, Sophie tensed, but Owen checked through the peephole and nodded. It's my friend Mike with the car. He opened the door to admit a tall, lanky man with kind eyes and a ready smile. So, this is the famous Hero I've been hearing about, Mike said, kneeling to get a better look at the dog. Poor guy's been through hell. But he's getting better, Elias insisted. He ate food and drank water and put his paw on my lap. Mike smiled at the boy. Then he's in good hands. Let's get him to the vet so he can get even better, okay? Together, the adults fashioned a makeshift stretcher using a blanket, gently lifting Hero onto it. The dog whimpered softly but didn't struggle as they carried him carefully down to the waiting car. I need to get some things for us, Sophie told Elias once Hero was settled in the back seat with him. We might be at the vet for a while. She ran back upstairs to grab her purse, a change of clothes for Elias, and a few small toys to keep him occupied. As she was about to leave, her phone rang, the diner's number flashing on the screen. Her heart pounding, she answered. Hello? Sophie, it's Tom. Look, I was hard on you earlier. You're a good worker, and I know you're doing your best as a single mom. If you can make it in for the evening shift, we'll forget about this morning. Sophie closed her eyes, relief washing over her. Thank you, Tom. I'll be there, I promise. Everything okay with your boy? Tom asked, his voice gruff but concerned. Sophie looked out the window at the car below, where Elias sat in the back seat, his small hand resting on Hero's head. It will be, she said softly. It will be. She hung up and hurried back downstairs, climbing into the back seat beside Elias and Hero. As the car pulled away from the curb, Elias looked up at her with worried eyes. Mama, what if the vet can't make Hero better? What if he's too sick? Sophie put her arm around her son's shoulders, drawing him close. Then we'll know we did everything we could, she said honestly. But Hero is strong, like you. He's fighting to stay with us. Elias nodded solemnly, then bent to whisper in Hero's ear. The dog's tail thumped weakly against the seat, confirmation that despite everything he'd endured, he wasn't ready to give up. In the front seat, Owen and Mike exchanged glances, moved by the bond forming between the boy and the dog. Neither of them knew what challenges lay ahead, what dangers might still threaten Hero's recovery. But in that moment, in the warm cocoon of the car, there was hope, fragile but undeniable. And sometimes, hope is enough to keep fighting. Has anyone else ever found a stray animal and felt that immediate connection? That unspoken bond that tells you this meeting wasn't just by chance? The veterinary clinic was small but clean, tucked away on a quiet street in a part of town Sophie rarely visited. Lisa, Owen's friend, was waiting for them at the door when they arrived, her face somber as she watched them gently lift Hero from the car. "Bring him straight back," she instructed, holding the door open. "I've got an exam room ready." Elias walked alongside the makeshift stretcher, his hand never leaving Hero's fur. "Are you a dog doctor?" he asked Lisa, his eyes wide with hope and fear. Lisa smiled down at him. "I am, and you must be the brave boy who found this guy." Elias nodded solemnly. "His name is Hero. He was tied to a dumpster, but he's good. He just needs help." "Then he came to the right place," Lisa assured him, as they carried Hero into the exam room. The examination was thorough and, at times, difficult to watch. Hero whimpered as Lisa probed his wounds, drew blood for testing, and took his temperature. Elias stood at the dog's head the entire time, whispering encouragement and stroking his ears. "The good news," Lisa said finally, "is that his vital signs are stronger than I expected, given his condition. The infection isn't as widespread as it could be, thanks to your quick first aid. There's no sign of internal bleeding, which is another plus." "And the bad news?" Sophie asked, bracing herself. Lisa's expression grew grave. "He's severely malnourished. You can see every bone in his body. The wound around his neck needs special attention. The skin is damaged down to the muscle in some places. And he's dehydrated, which is complicating his recovery." "But you can fix him, right?" Elias's voice was small but determined. Lisa knelt to look the boy in the eye. "I'm going to do everything I can," she promised. "But Hero has a long road ahead of him. He'll need to stay here for a few days so we can give him fluids through an IV and monitor his recovery." Elias's face crumpled. "But he'll be all alone." "I'll check on him every day," Owen assured the boy. "And so can you and your mom when you're able." Lisa nodded. "Visitors are good for recovery, but right now, the most important thing is getting him stable." For the next several hours, they watched as Lisa and her assistant set up Hero with an IV drip, cleaned and properly dressed his wounds, and settled him on a comfortable bed in a quiet corner of the clinic. Hero was too weak to do much more than watch them with wary eyes, but he no longer flinched when they touched him. Progress in its own small way. "I have to go to work soon," Sophie told Elias gently as the afternoon wore on. "But Owen has promised to stay with Hero until visiting hours are over, and Mrs. Peterson from downstairs said you can stay with her tonight." Elias looked torn, clearly not wanting to leave Hero, but understanding that his mother had no choice. "Can I say goodbye first?" "Of course," Sophie said, leading him over to where Hero lay. Elias knelt beside the bed and put his face close to Hero's. "I have to go now," he whispered, "but I'll come back tomorrow. You have to eat and drink and get strong, okay? I'll be so sad if you don't." Hero stared at the boy for a long moment, then lifted his head just enough to lick Elias's cheek, a promise of his own. Tears filled Elias's eyes, but he smiled bravely. "Good boy, I'll see you tomorrow." As they prepared to leave, Owen pulled Sophie aside. "I'll cover the vet bills," he said quietly. "Don't argue. It's the least I can do. This dog's suffering is partly on me, on all of us who suspected Carter's methods but didn't do enough to stop him." Sophie wanted to refuse, her pride rebelling at the thought of charity. But Hero needed help she couldn't afford, and her son's heart would break if the dog didn't recover. "Thank you," she said simply. Owen nodded. "I'll pick you and Elias up tomorrow after your shift. We can come visit Hero together." Sophie paused at the door, looking back at the broken dog who had so unexpectedly entered their lives. "He's going to make it, isn't he?" Owen followed her gaze. If sheer determination counts for anything, then yes, He's fighting hard, for himself, and for your boy. The next 3 days fell into an exhausting routine. Sophie worked double shifts at the diner, trying to make up for the hours she'd missed. Elias stayed with Mrs. Peterson during the day and spent evenings at the clinic with Hero, never leaving the dog's side until visiting hours ended. True to his word, Owen came by every day, often bringing small toys or treats that he claimed would help with Hero's rehabilitation. Sophie wasn't sure if that was true or if Owen simply couldn't resist spoiling both the dog and Elias, who was quickly growing attached to the gruff ex-officer. On the 4th day, something miraculous happened. When Sophie and Elias arrived at the clinic, they found Hero standing on his own, wobbling, unsteady, but standing. His legs trembled with the effort, but the determination in his eyes was unmistakable. "Hero!" Elias cried, rushing forward. "You're standing! You're so strong!" The dog's tail wagged weakly at the sound of the boy's voice, and he took one shaky step forward, then another. On the 3rd step, his legs gave out, and he collapsed to the floor with a whimper of frustration. "It's okay," Elias soothed, kneeling beside him. "You did so good. 3 whole steps." Lisa, who had been watching from the doorway, smiled. "He's been trying all day. Every time we come in to check on him, he's struggling to get up. I think he's determined to show you how hard he's working." "Can I help him practice?" Elias asked eagerly. Lisa nodded. "Gentle support under his stomach might help him balance, but don't let him overdo it. He's still very weak." For the next hour, Elias worked patiently with Hero, supporting the dog's weight as he practiced standing and taking a few steps. Each time Hero managed to stay up a little longer, take one more step, Elias praised him extravagantly, his face glowing with pride. Sophie watched, marveling at her son's patience and the dog's determination. There was something powerful happening between them, a bond forming that went beyond simple affection. Hero was fighting to recover not just for himself, but for the boy who had saved him. "He wants to make you proud," she told Elias as they left the clinic that night. "Did you see how he kept looking at you, checking to make sure you were watching?" Elias nodded solemnly. "He's trying really hard, Mama. Just like I try hard at school, even when the letters get all mixed up." Elias struggled with dyslexia, a battle that often left him in tears of frustration. Sophie squeezed his hand. "That's right. And you never give up, just like Hero isn't giving up." The improvement continued over the next few days. Hero graduated from the 4th to eating solid food on his own. Small amounts at first, carefully monitored to ensure his starved body could process it. The wound around his neck began to heal, pink scar tissue forming where raw flesh had been. On the 7th day, Lisa declared that Hero was stable enough to go home. "He still needs special care," she warned Sophie. "The antibiotics need to be continued for another week, and he shouldn't overexert himself. But I think he'll recover faster in a home environment, especially with Elias." Sophie hesitated. Their apartment was tiny, their budget stretched to the breaking point even before adding dog food and medication. But one look at Elias's hopeful face made the decision for her. "Welcome to the family, Hero," she said softly. Elias threw his arms around her. "Thank you, Mama. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Owen drove them home, Hero sitting on the back seat between him and Elias, more alert now, taking in his surroundings with cautious interest. When they arrived at the apartment building, Hero managed to walk inside on his own, though slowly and with frequent pauses to rest. "Look at you, walking all by yourself," Elias encouraged, staying close to the dog's side. "You're the strongest, bravest dog ever." Inside the apartment, Hero sniffed around cautiously, reacquainting himself with the space he'd first entered as a dying animal a week before. He moved carefully from room to room, Elias trailing behind him, until they reached the boy's bedroom. There, Hero paused, looking at the small bed with its worn blanket, the same blanket Elias had placed over him the first night. Then, with deliberate care, Hero circled once and lay down beside the bed, as if claiming his spot. "That's right," Elias said, delighted. "You sleep right there, next to me. I'll keep the bad dreams away." That night, Sophie was awakened by an unfamiliar sound. She lay still, listening intently, then realized what it was. Silence. No tossing and turning from Elias's room, no muffled crying. Her son, who had suffered from nightmares since his father left, was sleeping peacefully for the first time in years. Curious, she crept to his door and peered inside. Elias was indeed fast asleep, one arm dangling off the bed to rest on Hero's back. The dog was awake, his eyes reflecting the moonlight from the window. He was on guard, watching over the child who had saved him. Sophie's eyes filled with tears at the sight. Somehow, this broken dog had found the strength not just to survive, but to protect, to give back the love that had saved his life. The next few weeks brought steady improvement. Hero gained weight, his fur began to shine, and the haunted look in his eyes gradually faded. He still had scars, some physical, others invisible, but he was learning to trust again, one day at a time. Elias took his responsibility as Hero's caretaker seriously. He hand-fed the dog each meal, carefully measuring out the portions Lisa had recommended. "You need to eat it all," he would insist when Hero tried to turn away. "Just one more bite. Please, Hero." And Hero, who surely understood the word please by now, would obediently take one more bite, then another, his eyes never leaving the boy's face. Sophie researched everything she could about caring for formerly abused dogs, spending her rare free moments reading articles online at the public library. She learned about trigger signs, rehabilitation techniques, and the importance of consistent, gentle handling. One evening, as she was preparing dinner, she watched Elias attempting to teach Hero to shake paws, a simple trick that the dog seemed reluctant to try. "It's okay if you're scared," Elias was saying, his voice patient. "We can try something else." Sophie was about to suggest a different activity when Hero slowly, hesitantly raised his paw. It hovered in the air for a moment, trembling before gently coming to rest on Elias's outstretched hand. Elias's face lit up with such joy that Sophie had to turn away, her eyes suddenly wet. Such a small gesture, a dog offering his paw, but she understood the magnitude of that trust. Hero was choosing to reach out, to connect, despite everything humans had done to hurt him. Owen visited regularly, bringing supplies and checking on Hero's progress. He seemed genuinely impressed by the dog's recovery. "He's a different animal," he remarked one afternoon, watching Hero and Elias play a gentle game of tug-of-war with a rope toy. "I wasn't sure he'd ever trust humans again after what Carter did to him." "He trusts Elias," Sophie said. "Completely." Owen nodded thoughtfully. "That's the thing about kids. They love without judgment, without reservation. Hero knows that Elias sees him exactly as he is and loves him anyway." "Do you think Carter is still looking for him?" Sophie asked quietly, the question that had been weighing on her mind. Owen's expression darkened. "I haven't heard anything through my contacts, but men like Carter don't like loose ends. An abused dog that can be traced back to him is a liability." Fear clutched at Sophie's heart. "Should we be worried?" "Just cautious," Owen advised. "I'm still building my case against him. When it's strong enough, I'll take it to internal affairs. Until then," he trailed off, his meaning clear. Until then, Hero, and by extension, Elias, might still be at risk. That night, after Elias was asleep, Sophie double-checked all the locks on the doors and windows. The thought of anyone threatening her son or the dog he had come to love filled her with a cold rage she'd never experienced before. "We'll protect each other," she whispered to Hero, who sat alert at her feet, as if sensing her unease. "All of us." Hero looked up at her, his eyes clear and steady now, no longer clouded with pain and despair. He leaned against her leg, offering his own silent reassurance. They were in this together. Days turned into weeks. Hero's physical recovery progressed steadily, his body filling out, his strength returning. The rehabilitation of his spirit was slower, marked by small victories and occasional setbacks. Loud noises still sent him cowering into corners. Men who resembled Carter could trigger trembling episodes that sometimes lasted for hours. But with each passing day, these reactions became less severe, less frequent. Elias proved to be an instinctive trainer, somehow understanding exactly how to help Hero overcome his fears. When thunderstorms made the dog tremble, Elias would build a fort of blankets and pillows where they could hide together, the boy reading stories aloud until the storm passed. When Hero balked at walking near the police station on their route to the park, Elias would sit patiently on the sidewalk, waiting until the dog gathered his courage. "It's okay to be scared," he would say. "Being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It just means you keep going anyway." Sophie often wondered where her son had learned such wisdom. Certainly not from her. She was still figuring out how to be brave in her own life. One morning, about a month after they had brought Hero home, Sophie woke to find Elias already up, unusual for a child who typically had to be dragged from bed for school. She found him in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the floor with Hero, speaking in a soft, serious voice. "What are you doing up so early?" she asked, stifling a yawn. Elias looked up with a smile. "Teaching Hero about our family. He needs to know all about us if he's going to stay forever." Sophie's heart squeezed painfully in her chest. They hadn't discussed Hero's permanent status in their home. She'd been taking it one day at a time, not wanting to make promises she couldn't keep, to the dog or to her son. "What are you telling him?" she asked, sitting down beside them. "About how it's just you and me, but that's okay because we're strong, and about how Daddy left when I was little, but it wasn't because of me." Elias's voice wavered slightly on this last part, a hint of old pain that Sophie thought had healed. "That's right," she said firmly, pulling him into a hug. "It was never, ever because of you." Elias nodded, leaning into her embrace. "And I told Hero that now it's you and me and him, and that's even better because 3 is a bigger family than 2. "Is that so?" Sophie asked, her throat tight with emotion. "Uh-huh. And Hero agrees, don't you, boy?" Hero's tail thumped against the floor in apparent agreement, his eyes bright and alert, so different from the dull, lifeless gaze Sophie had first seen in that alley. Maybe Elias was right. Maybe they were a family now, unconventional, still healing, but stronger together than apart. As if reading her thoughts, Hero rose and moved to sit between them, leaning his weight against both Sophie and Elias. The message couldn't have been clearer if he'd spoken it aloud. We belong together. Later that day, while Elias was at school and Sophie was cleaning the apartment, she heard a soft whimper from the living room. She found Hero standing at the window, his body rigid, a low growl building in his throat. Sophie peered out but saw nothing unusual, just the normal street scene below. "What is it, boy?" she asked, stroking his head. "What do you see?" Hero's growl deepened, and he paced anxiously between the window and the door. Unease prickled along Sophie's spine. She'd come to trust Hero's instincts. If something was bothering him, there was usually a reason. She double-checked the locks, then pulled the curtains closed. "It's okay," she told Hero, though she didn't entirely believe it herself. "We're safe." But that night, as she was taking out the trash, Sophie spotted a car she didn't recognize parked across the street. A dark sedan with tinted windows. A man sat behind the wheel, his face shadowed, but she could feel his eyes following her movements. Fear clutched at her heart, and she hurried back inside, locking the door behind her. Was it just her imagination, fueled by Owen's warnings? Or was someone really watching their building? Sophie tried to dismiss her fears, but when she went to bed that night, she found herself listening for unusual sounds, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building. Beside Elias's bed, Hero remained alert, his ears pricked forward, his body tense. In the middle of the night, Sophie woke with a start, her heart pounding. Something had disturbed her sleep, a sound, a presence. She lay perfectly still, straining to hear over the blood rushing in her ears. There it was again. A soft creak from the living room, like someone testing their weight on the old floorboards. Then the distinct sound of the doorknob being carefully, quietly turned. Terror flooded Sophie's veins, but she forced herself to remain calm. Silently, she slipped out of bed and made her way to Elias's room. Her son was fast asleep, one arm thrown over Hero's neck. The dog, however, was wide awake, his head raised, a low, almost inaudible growl vibrating in his chest. He knew someone was trying to get in. Sophie placed a gentle hand on his back, signaling him to stay quiet. Then she carefully shook Elias awake. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her mouth close to his ear. "I need you to be very quiet and come with me right now." Elias blinked sleepily, but something in his mother's face must have communicated the urgency of the situation. Without a word, he slipped out of bed and took her hand. With Hero close behind them, Sophie led Elias to the bathroom, the only room in the apartment with a lock and no windows. She closed the door as quietly as possible and turned the lock, then pulled out her cell phone to call 911. As she waited for the dispatcher to answer, she could hear footsteps moving through the apartment, slow, careful, but unmistakable. Someone was inside. 911, what's your emergency?" The dispatcher's voice came through the phone. Before Sophie could answer, a loud crash sounded from the living room, followed by a string of curses. Something had been knocked over, the lamp perhaps, or the side table. "Someone's broken into our apartment," Sophie whispered urgently into the phone, giving their address. "Please hurry, I'm locked in the bathroom with my 4-year-old son. Officers are on their way," the dispatcher assured her. "Stay on the line with me. Are you safe right now?" "I think so, but—" Sophie broke off as another sound reached her ears. A deep, menacing growl, louder than any she'd heard from Hero before. The dog had slipped out of the bathroom. Elias realized it at the same moment. "Hero!" he gasped, reaching for the door. Sophie caught his arm. "No, Elias! You have to stay here." "But Hero!" Tears filled Elias's eyes. "He'll get hurt." From the living room came the sound of a man's startled oath, then a thud and a yelp of pain. From Hero or the intruder, Sophie couldn't tell. The dispatcher was asking questions, but Sophie was no longer listening. All she could focus on were the sounds of struggle from the other room, growls, crashing furniture, a man's angry shouts. Then, sudden silence. Sophie's blood ran cold. Had Hero been hurt? Killed? Was the intruder now coming for them? Elias was sobbing quietly, his small body trembling against hers. "Hero," he kept whispering. "Hero." More sounds reached them, different now. Multiple voices, the heavy tread of boots, the crackle of radios. The police had arrived. "Police! Come out with your hands up!" A commanding voice called. More scuffling, a man's angry protests, the distinctive sound of handcuffs closing. Then a knock at the bathroom door. "Ma'am, this is Officer Reyes with NYPD. You're safe now. We have the intruder in custody." Shakily, Sophie unlocked the door. 2 officers stood in the hallway, their expressions grim but reassuring. "Your dog cornered the intruder until we arrived," Officer Reyes explained. "Brave animal, he's a bit scraped up, but he'll be okay." "Hero!" Elias cried, breaking free from Sophie's grasp and running to the living room. There stood Hero, panting heavily, a small cut above his eye, but otherwise unharmed. When he saw Elias, his tail began to wag frantically. Elias threw himself at the dog, burying his face in Hero's fur. "You saved us," he sobbed. "You protected us." Sophie followed more slowly, taking in the scene, the overturned furniture, the broken lamp, the dark-haired man now handcuffed and being led out by a 3rd officer. "Wait," she called, suddenly needing to see his face. "Who is he? Why was he in our home?" Officer Reyes glanced at his colleague. "We found police ID on him. He's a K9 handler named Carter. Mean anything to you?" Sophie's knees went weak, and she had to grab the wall for support. "Yes," she whispered. "He's the one who abused our dog and left him to die. The one Owen, a retired K9 officer, has been building a case against." Officer Reyes' expression hardened. "We'll need statements from all of you, including this Owen, but for now, try to rest. We'll have an officer outside your door for the rest of the night." After the police left, taking Carter with them, Sophie couldn't bear the thought of returning to bed. Instead, she made hot chocolate and sat with Elias on the couch, Hero curled protectively at their feet. "He really is a hero," Elias said, his eyes drooping with exhaustion, but still bright with pride. "That's why I named him that? I knew it all along." Sophie stroked her son's hair, her heart full of love and gratitude. "Yes, he is. And so are you, my brave boy." Elias yawned, snuggling closer to her. "We saved each other," he murmured sleepily. "That's what family does. Family." The word echoed in Sophie's mind as Elias drifted off to sleep against her shoulder. Yes, they were a family now, forged in crisis, bonded by love, and made stronger by the broken pieces they had helped each other mend. Hero looked up at her, his eyes clear and steady, no longer haunted by his past. In them, Sophie saw something she hadn't noticed before, not just loyalty or gratitude, but a profound sense of purpose. This dog, who had once been discarded like trash, had found his calling, protecting the child who had saved him. As dawn broke, painting the small apartment in soft golden light, Sophie made a silent promise to both Elias and Hero. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together, the 3 of them against the world. What would you do if someone tried to hurt your pet? Would you be as brave as Hero was protecting his new family? Owen arrived at their apartment early the next morning, his face tight with worry. Sophie had called him as soon as the police left, knowing he would want to hear about Carter's break-in immediately. "Are you all okay?" he demanded as soon as Sophie opened the door. His eyes quickly scanned the disheveled living room, taking in the evidence of the previous night's struggle. "We're fine," Sophie assured him, shaken but not hurt. "Hero protected us," Elias announced proudly from where he sat on the floor beside the dog. "He's not even scared of bad guys." Owen knelt to examine the cut above Hero's eye. "You did good, boy," he said softly, scratching behind the dog's ears. "Real good." Hero leaned into Owen's touch, his tail wagging slightly. In the weeks since his rescue, he'd come to accept Owen as part of his small circle of trusted humans. "The police found Carter's ID," Sophie told Owen, keeping her voice low so Elias wouldn't hear all the details. "They took him into custody. An officer said they'll need statements from all of us, including you." Owen nodded grimly. "I've already called my contact at Internal Affairs. This attempted break-in, combined with the evidence I've been gathering about Carter's abuse of K9s, should be enough to put him away for a long time." "Why did he come here?" Sophie asked, the question that had kept her awake for what remained of the night. "Why now?" "My guess? Someone at the clinic recognized Hero, and word got back to Carter." Owen sighed heavily. "Men like him can't stand loose ends. A living, recovering hero is evidence of his cruelty, evidence that could end his career and possibly send him to jail." A chill ran down Sophie's spine. "So, he came to—" Owen nodded, understanding her unfinished question. "To eliminate the evidence, probably planned to make it look like Hero attacked your son, giving him justification to shoot the dog." Sophie felt sick at the thought. "But why risk breaking in? Why not just wait until we were walking Hero outside?" "Because he's arrogant," Owen said flatly. "Men like Carter believe they're untouchable. Plus, inside your apartment, there would be no witnesses." Elias, who had been listening more carefully than they realized, suddenly spoke up. Was the bad man going to hurt Hero? Sophie and Owen exchanged worried glances. How much should they tell him? "He wanted to take Hero away," Sophie said finally, deciding on a version of the truth that wouldn't terrify her son. "But Hero was too smart and too brave. He kept us safe until the police came." Elias's small face hardened with a determination that looked out of place on his childish features. "No one will take Hero from me," he declared. "I'll protect him this time." The simple statement, delivered with such conviction, brought tears to Sophie's eyes. This little boy, not even 5 years old, was ready to stand between his dog and danger, just as Hero had stood between them and Carter. "No one's taking Hero anywhere," Owen assured him. "Carter's in jail, and he's going to stay there. But I think it might be a good idea if you all stayed somewhere else for a few days, just until things settle down." "We could go to Grandma's," Elias suggested excitedly. Sophie's mother lived in a small house in the suburbs, about an hour outside the city. Sophie hesitated. Her relationship with her mother was complicated at best. They hadn't spoken in months, not since their last argument about Sophie's poor life choices. Taking Elias for a visit was one thing. Showing up with a rescued German shepherd was quite another. "I'm not sure, baby," she began. "I have another suggestion," Owen interrupted. "I have a cabin upstate. It's nothing fancy, but it's quiet, peaceful. Good place to recover from a scare like last night. You and Elias and Hero could stay there as long as you need to." Sophie was about to refuse. She'd already accepted too much help from this man who had begun as a stranger, but the thought of staying in the apartment after last night's invasion made her skin crawl, and Elias was looking at her with such hope. "That's very generous," she said finally, "but I can't take that much time off work, not after already missing shifts when we first found Hero." "Just a weekend then," Owen pressed. "You all could use a break from the city. Some fresh air would do Hero good too." Before Sophie could respond, a sharp knock at the door made them all jump. Hero immediately positioned himself between Elias and the door, his hackles rising. "Police," a familiar voice called. "Officer Reyes." Sophie relaxed slightly and opened the door to find the officer from the previous night, accompanied by a plainclothes detective. "Ms. Winters," Officer Reyes greeted her. "This is Detective Malik. We need to talk about what happened last night and take formal statements. Is now a good time?" Sophie nodded, ushering them in. "This is Owen Garcia," she introduced. "He's the retired K9 officer I mentioned, who's been investigating Carter." Detective Malik's eyebrows rose with interest. "Mr. Garcia, I've heard your name mentioned in connection with several complaints against the K9 unit. Seems like we have a lot to talk about." The next hour was consumed with questions, statements, and discussions of what would happen next. Carter was being held without bail, charged with breaking and entering, attempted animal cruelty, and child endangerment. The detective confirmed that Owen's evidence against Carter would be critical in building a stronger case. "What about Hero?" Elias asked, his arm around the dog's neck. "Does he have to go to court?" Detective Malik smiled at the boy. "No, Hero doesn't have to go to court, but we might need some pictures of his injuries from when you first found him, if you have any." "I took some," Owen said. "For my investigation. I'll send them to you." "Good. That will help." The detective handed Owen his card. "Call me if Carter tries to contact any of you, or if you notice anything suspicious." After the police left, Owen turned to Sophie. "About that cabin." Sophie looked at Elias, who was whispering something in Hero's ear, then at the broken lamp and overturned furniture, evidence of how close they'd come to tragedy. A weekend away from the memories of last night suddenly seemed not just appealing, but necessary. "Okay," she agreed, "just for the weekend." Elias cheered, and even Hero seemed to perk up, as if understanding they were going somewhere new and exciting. "We can leave tomorrow morning," Owen suggested. "I'll pick you up around 8. After he left, Sophie began packing a small bag for herself and Elias. As she folded clothes into their worn suitcase, she found herself wondering about Owen's involvement in their lives. He'd gone far beyond professional interest in Hero's case, becoming something like a friend to all of them. She wasn't sure how she felt about that, about accepting his help and concern. "Mama," Elias called from the living room, interrupting her thoughts. "Hero's scared." Sophie hurried out to find Hero, pacing anxiously by the door, whimpering softly. "What's wrong, boy?" she asked, kneeling beside him. Elias's face was solemn. "I think he's afraid the bad man will come back." Sophie stroked Hero's head, feeling the slight tremor that ran through his body. "Carter can't hurt you anymore," she promised the dog. "He's in jail, and he's going to stay there." But Hero remained agitated, refusing to move away from the door, except when Elias called him to dinner. That night, instead of sleeping beside Elias's bed as usual, Hero positioned himself in the hallway between the bedrooms and the front door, standing guard. Sophie lay awake long after Elias had fallen asleep, listening to Hero's occasional movements as he patrolled the apartment, checking windows and doors. Only when dawn began to lighten the sky did the dog finally settle down, apparently satisfied that no threat would come that night. Owen arrived promptly at 8 the next morning, helping them load their meager luggage into his truck. Hero seemed uncertain about getting into the vehicle until Elias climbed in and patted the seat beside him. Then the dog jumped up without hesitation, settling himself close to the boy. The drive upstate took nearly 3 hours, during which Elias chattered excitedly about all the adventures he and Hero would have in the woods. Sophie dozed in the passenger seat, exhausted from her sleepless night, while Owen drove steadily, occasionally pointing out landmarks or interesting sights to Elias. "We're here," Owen announced finally, turning onto a narrow dirt road that wound through dense forest. Sophie sat up, taking in their surroundings. The trees were thick on either side of the road, their leaves creating a dapple pattern of sunlight on the ground. After another quarter-mile, the forest opened up to reveal a small clearing with a rustic cabin nestled at its center. "It's not much," Owen said, sounding almost apologetic, "but it's peaceful." "It's perfect," Sophie replied, meaning it. After the noise and danger of the city, this quiet sanctuary seemed like exactly what they all needed. The cabin was simple but comfortable, with 2 bedrooms, a small kitchen, and a living area dominated by a stone fireplace. The furniture was well worn but clean, and large windows let in ample light and views of the surrounding woods. "There's a lake about a half-mile that way," Owen said, pointing east. "Good for swimming in the summer, though it might be a bit cool now, and plenty of hiking trails all around." Elias could barely contain his excitement. "Can Hero and I explore? Please, Mama?" "Let's get settled first," Sophie said. "Then we can all go for a walk." While Owen showed Elias around the cabin, pointing out the collection of board games and books in a corner cabinet, Sophie unpacked their few belongings, marveling at how different this place felt from their cramped apartment. Here, there was space to breathe, to think, to heal. Hero seemed to feel it too. The tension that had gripped him since Carter's break-in gradually eased as he explored the cabin and the immediate surroundings. By the time they set out for a walk that afternoon, he was moving with more confidence than Sophie had ever seen, his head high, his ears alert to the new sounds of the forest. "He looks like a different dog," she remarked to Owen as they followed a gentle trail through the woods, Elias running ahead with Hero at his side. Owen nodded. "Nature has a way of healing what humans break," he said quietly. "I used to bring rescue dogs up here sometimes, especially the ones that had been through the worst abuse. You'd be amazed how quickly they start to recover once they're away from the concrete and noise. You've done this a lot, haven't you? Rescued dogs, helped them recover." Owen shrugged. "It's a way of making amends, I suppose, for all the times I suspected what handlers like Carter were doing, but didn't speak up soon enough." Sophie studied his profile, seeing the regret etched in the lines around his eyes. "You're speaking up now," she said softly. "That counts for something." He glanced at her, a small smile lifting the corner of his mouth. "I hope so." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, watching as Elias discovered the wonders of the forest, a brightly colored bird, a chattering squirrel, the perfect climbing tree. Hero stayed close to the boy, occasionally darting off to investigate an interesting scent, but always returning to Elias's side within moments. That evening, Owen built a fire in the fireplace while Sophie prepared a simple dinner from the supplies he'd stocked in the cabin. Elias sat on the floor nearby, playing a quiet game of tug-of-war with Hero using a rope toy Owen had brought. It was, Sophie realized with a pang, the most normal, peaceful evening they'd had in years, almost like being a real family. The thought startled her. Where had that come from? Owen wasn't family. He was a kind stranger who had helped them in a crisis. Nothing more. But as the evening progressed, as they ate dinner together and played a board game by the fire, Sophie couldn't help noticing how right it felt, how natural. Elias clearly adored Owen, hanging on his every word and beaming when the man praised him. Even Hero had accepted Owen into their small circle, occasionally resting his head on the man's knee or bringing him the rope toy for another round of gentle tugging. When it was time for Elias to go to bed, Owen excused himself to check the perimeter of the cabin, giving them privacy for their bedtime routine. Sophie tucked her son into the twin bed in the smaller bedroom, Hero already curled up on the braided rug beside it. "Mama," Elias said sleepily as she kissed his forehead. "I like it here. Can we stay forever?" Sophie smoothed his hair back from his face. "We have to go back to the city on Sunday, baby. We have our apartment and I have my job, and you have school." Elias's face fell. "But Hero likes it here too. He's not scared anymore." "We can come back to visit," Sophie promised, hoping Owen wouldn't mind. "If Mr. Owen says it's okay." "He'll say yes," Elias mumbled, his eyes already closing. "He likes us." Sophie stayed until Elias's breathing deepened into sleep, then quietly left the room, leaving the door ajar so Hero could come and go as he pleased. She found Owen sitting on the small porch that wrapped around the front of the cabin, a mug of coffee in his hands, staring out at the night sky. She hesitated in the doorway, suddenly shy. "He's asleep?" Owen asked, turning to look at her. Sophie nodded. "Out like a light. All that fresh air and running around wore him out." "There's coffee in the kitchen if you want some," Owen offered. "Or there's wine if you prefer." "Wine sounds nice," Sophie admitted. It had been a long time since she'd had the luxury of a glass of wine in the evening. She found the bottle and glasses in the kitchen and brought them out to the porch, settling into the second Adirondack chair beside Owen's. The night was cool but not cold, the sky a canopy of stars unlike anything visible in the city. "Thank you for this," Sophie said, after pouring them each a glass. "For everything, really. You've gone above and beyond for us. For Hero." Owen took a sip of his wine before responding. "I've been alone a long time," he said finally. "My wife died 6 years ago. Cancer. We never had kids. After I retired, there wasn't much purpose to my days until I started investigating cases like Hero's. It gave me something to fight for again." "I'm sorry about your wife," Sophie said softly. Owen nodded his acknowledgement. Elias is a special kid. The way he connected with Hero, how determined he was to save him. You don't see that kind of compassion every day, especially in someone so young. You've done a good job with him. Sophie felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. "I try. It hasn't been easy, raising him alone. His father isn't in the picture? Left when Elias was 2, Sophie said, keeping her voice neutral. Said he wasn't ready for the responsibility of a family. Last I heard, he was in California, starting over with a new girlfriend. Owen's expression darkened. His loss, he said simply. They sipped their wine in companionable silence, watching as a meteor streaked across the sky, a brief flash of light in the darkness. Will Carter really go to jail? Sophie asked eventually, the question that had been weighing on her mind. For what he did to Hero. Owen considered this. For the break-in, definitely. For the abuse, it depends on how the prosecutor handles it. Animal cruelty cases are taken more seriously now than they used to be, but there's still a tendency to see them as less important than crimes against humans. That's not right, Sophie said, anger flaring in her chest. You should have seen Hero when we found him. What Carter did was... it was evil. I agree, Owen said quietly, but the important thing is that Hero is safe now. He has a family that loves him. That's more justice than most abused animals ever get. A family. There was that word again, filling Sophie with both warmth and unease. Was that what they were now? She, Elias, and Hero? Before she could pursue the thought, the cabin door creaked open, and Hero padded out onto the porch. He looked at them both, then settled himself at Sophie's feet with a contented sigh. Checking on us? Owen asked the dog with a smile. Making sure we're safe? Hero's tail thumped against the wooden porch in response. He takes his job as protector very seriously, Sophie observed, reaching down to scratch behind his ears. Ever since the break-in, he's been on high alert. Owen nodded thoughtfully. That's common with dogs who've been through trauma. They channel their fear into protecting their new family. It gives them a sense of purpose, of control. Will he ever fully recover from what Carter did to him? Physically, yes. The scars will fade, his body will heal. Emotionally, Owen shrugged. Dogs are remarkably resilient. They live in the present in a way humans can't. Hero will probably always have certain triggers, situations that frighten him or make him anxious. But with consistent love and care, he'll continue to improve. Sophie looked down at Hero, at the scars still visible on his body, at the trust now evident in his eyes when he looked at her. He's already come so far, she said softly. Thanks to you and Elias, Owen reminded her. And you, Sophie added. We couldn't have done this without you. Owen smiled, the firelight from inside the cabin casting warm shadows across his face. It's been my privilege, he said simply. The weekend passed in a blur of hikes through the woods, quiet evenings by the fire, and for Sophie, more restful sleep than she'd had in years. Away from the pressures of work and city life, she found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't thought possible. Hero thrived in the forest environment. By Sunday morning, he was racing through the trees with Elias, playing a game of hide and seek that had the boy shrieking with laughter every time Hero found his hiding place. The haunted look had vanished from the dog's eyes, replaced by a bright alertness that made him seem years younger. As they packed to return to the city, Sophie felt a pang of regret. She'd grown to love the quiet of the cabin, the simplicity of their days here. More than that, she'd grown to appreciate Owen's steady presence, his quiet strength, his gentle way, with both Elias and Hero. We can come back, Owen said, seeming to read her thoughts as he loaded their bags into the truck. Anytime you want. The cabin's just sitting empty most weekends. We'd like that, Sophie replied, surprised by how much she meant it. The drive back to the city was quieter than the journey out. A touch of melancholy settling over all of them as the forest gave way to suburbs and then to the dense architecture of the city. Home, sweet home, Sophie said with forced cheerfulness as Owen pulled up in front of their apartment building. Elias looked up at the grimy facade with obvious reluctance. Can't we go back to the cabin? Not today, buddy, Owen told him, but soon, okay? This seemed to satisfy Elias, who took Hero's leash and led the dog toward the building entrance. Sophie hung back for a moment with Owen. Thank you again, she said. The weekend was exactly what we all needed. Owen nodded. I enjoyed it too, he admitted. More than I expected to. There was something in his voice, a warmth that made Sophie look up sharply. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of how their lives had become intertwined through Hero's rescue. The moment was broken by Elias calling from the doorway. "Mama, are you coming?" "Be right there," Sophie called back. To Owen she added, "Will you come up? Just for a few minutes?" He shook his head regretfully. "I should get back. I have a meeting with Detective Malik tomorrow morning about Carter's case, but I'll check in on you all soon." Sophie nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. "Of course. Good luck with the meeting." She was halfway to the building when Owen called after her. "Sophie?" She turned back. "Yes?" "Lock your doors tonight. Carter's still in custody, but sometimes these guys have friends." A chill ran down Sophie's spine, but she forced a smile. "We will. Hero will be on guard duty anyway." Inside the apartment, everything was as they had left it. The broken lamp still on the floor, the furniture still askew from Carter's break-in. Sophie had meant to clean up before they left for the cabin, but hadn't had the energy or the heart for it. "Let's fix up our home," she told Elias, trying to sound upbeat. "Make it nice again." Together, they straightened the furniture, swept up the broken glass, and rearranged the few decorative items that had been knocked over. Hero followed them from room to room, occasionally picking up a fallen item and bringing it to them, as if helping with the cleanup. That night, after Elias was asleep, Sophie sat in the living room with Hero, the silence of the apartment feeling oppressive after the natural sounds of the cabin. Hero seemed to sense her unease. He lay close to her feet, his body alert, his eyes repeatedly scanning the room. "It's okay," she told him, though she didn't entirely believe it herself. "We're safe here." A soft sound from outside made them both freeze. Hero's ears pricked forward, a low growl building in his throat. Sophie's heart pounded as she moved to the window, carefully peering out through a gap in the curtains. The street below was mostly empty, but a car was idling across the way, a dark sedan similar to the one she'd noticed before. As she watched, the car's headlights flashed once, twice, then it pulled away from the curb and disappeared around the corner. A warning, a threat, or just a coincidence? Sophie backed away from the window, her hands shaking. She checked the locks on the door and windows, then grabbed her phone and called Owen. He answered on the second ring. "Sophie? Everything okay?" "I'm not sure," she admitted, keeping her voice low so as not to wake Elias. "There was a car outside, just like the one I saw before. It flashed its lights and then drove off." Owen was silent for a moment. "Could be nothing," he said finally. "Or it could be one of Carter's buddies letting you know they're watching. Either way, stay inside, keep the doors locked. I'll be there first thing in the morning to take you and Elias to school and work." "You don't have to." "I want to," Owen interrupted, "just to be safe. And Sophie, put Hero near the door tonight. His hearing is better than yours, and his instincts are sharp. If anyone tries to get in, he'll know." After they hung up, Sophie did as Owen suggested, making a comfortable spot for Hero in the hallway, where he could monitor both the front door and the bedrooms. The dog settled in with a sigh, his eyes alert, his body positioned to spring up at the first sign of trouble. "Good boy," Sophie whispered, stroking his head. "Keep us safe tonight." In his room, Elias slept peacefully, unaware of his mother's fears. Sophie stood in his doorway for a long moment, watching the rise and fall of his small chest, marveling at the way he could sleep so soundly, despite everything they'd been through. Children were resilient, she supposed. Like dogs, they lived in the present, adapting to new circumstances with a flexibility adults often lacked. As she prepared for bed, Sophie found herself thinking about Owen, about the quiet strength he'd shown throughout their ordeal. She'd grown to rely on him in a way that both comforted and alarmed her. It had been a long time since she'd trusted a man, since she'd allowed anyone to help her and Elias. But Owen was different. His concern seemed genuine, his help offered without expectation of return. And the way he was with Elias, patient, kind, attentive, spoke to a depth of character Sophie had all but given up on finding. She was still thinking about him when she drifted off to sleep, her dreams a confused jumble of dark sedans, cabin porches, and the feeling of being watched. In the middle of the night, a sharp bark jolted her awake. Hero was on his feet in the hallway, his body rigid, a deep growl rumbling from his chest. Sophie stumbled out of bed, her heart racing. "What is it, boy?" she whispered, straining to hear whatever had disturbed the dog. Hero's growl intensified, his focus fixed on the front door. Sophie reached for her phone, ready to call 911, when something unexpected happened. The growl abruptly stopped, replaced by a soft whine. Hero's tail began to wag, and he pawed at the door, in a gesture Sophie had come to recognize as greeting someone familiar. Cautiously, she approached the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway outside was dimly lit, but she could make out a familiar figure, Owen, his expression tense, his hand raised to knock. Relief flooded through her as she unlocked the door. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. Owen slipped inside, closing and locking the door behind him. "I had a bad feeling," he admitted. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd check on you all." Hero pressed against Owen's legs, his entire body wiggling with welcome. Owen bent to scratch behind the dog's ears, murmuring quiet praise. "You drove all the way back to the city because of a feeling?" Sophie asked, not sure whether to be touched or concerned by such behavior. Owen straightened, looking slightly embarrassed. "Sounds crazy when you put it that way. But in my line of work, I learned to trust my instincts, and my instincts said you might need backup tonight." Before Sophie could respond, Hero suddenly stiffened again, his attention shifting to the window. Owen moved swiftly, pulling aside the curtain just enough to peer out. "Two men," he reported quietly. "By the side entrance. One's picking the lock." Sophie's blood ran cold. "Carter's friends?" Owen nodded grimly. "Most likely. Call 911. I'll wake Elias. We need to get out of here now." As Sophie fumbled with her phone, Owen hurried to Elias's room. Moments later, he emerged with the still sleeping boy in his arms, wrapped in a blanket. "Fire escape," Owen said tersely. "It's our best option. They'll be coming up the main stairs any minute." Sophie nodded, her mind racing. They needed to escape, to find safety until the police arrived. But where could they go in the middle of the night? "My truck's parked around the corner," Owen said, seeming to read her thoughts. "If we can get to it, we can drive to the police station." Hero led the way to the window that opened onto the fire escape, his body language alert but controlled. There was no fear in him now, only determination, a guardian ready to protect his family at any cost. As Owen carefully maneuvered the sleeping Elias through the window, Sophie cast one last glance around the apartment, the home she'd worked so hard to create for her son, now threatened by men who would hurt a dog for being too gentle, who would harm a child to cover their crimes. A fierce anger rose in her, replacing the fear. These men had taken enough, Hero's health and happiness for a time, their sense of security, the peace they'd briefly found. She wouldn't let them take anything more. With Hero at her side and Owen leading the way with Elias, Sophie stepped out onto the fire escape, ready to fight for the family they had become. Have you ever had a moment when your intuition or a bad feeling turned out to be right? What happened and how did you react? The descent down the fire escape was a nightmare of rusty metal and precarious footing. Sophie went first, with Hero close behind her, while Owen followed carefully with Elias, still sleeping in his arms. The boy stirred as the cold night air hit his face, but didn't fully wake, murmuring something unintelligible before nestling deeper into Owen's shoulder. "Almost there," Owen whispered as they reached the second-floor landing. "Just one more flight." Suddenly, Hero froze. His ears perked forward, a low growl building in his throat. Before Sophie could ask what was wrong, voices drifted up from the alley below. "Check the fire escape. They might try to run." Sophie's heart hammered in her chest. Carter's men were already in the alley, cutting off their escape route. She looked up at Owen, panic flaring in her eyes. "Up!" he mouthed, gesturing toward the roof. "Go!" They reversed direction, climbing as quietly as possible back up the fire escape, past their floor and continuing to the roof. Hero moved silently beside them, his body tense but controlled, no longer the frightened, abused animal they had found in the alley, but a protector, alert to every threat. When they reached the roof, Owen gently set Elias down, the boy finally waking fully as his feet touched the concrete surface. "Mama," he mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "Where are we?" "On an adventure," Sophie said quickly, forcing a smile. "We're playing a special game of hide and seek." Elias's eyes widened as he took in their surroundings, the dark expanse of the roof, the city skyline beyond. Hero standing vigilant at the edge of the fire escape. "Is the bad man looking for us again?" "Some friends of his," Owen confirmed, seeing no point in lying to the child. "But the police are coming, and we're going to be fine. We just need to stay quiet and hidden for a little while." Sophie pulled Elias close, wrapping the blanket more securely around his small shoulders. The night was cool, and fear had made her forget to grab coats in their hasty escape. "Did you reach 911?" Owen asked in a hushed voice. Sophie nodded. "They said officers are on the way." "Good. We just need to lay low until—" The sound of the roof access door being tested interrupted him. Someone was trying to get onto the roof from inside the building. Owen motioned for them to move behind a large air conditioning unit, providing at least some cover from immediate sight. Hero positioned himself in front of Elias, his hackles raised, body tense and ready. "If they find us," Owen whispered to Sophie, "take Elias and run to the next building. The roofs are connected by a maintenance walkway on the east side." "What about you and Hero?" Sophie asked, already knowing the answer, dreading it. Owen's eyes met hers, steady and resolute. "We'll hold them off. Give you time." "No," Sophie said fiercely. "We stay together, all of us." Before Owen could argue, the roof access door burst open. Two men stepped out, one tall and lean, the other stockier, both with the hard eyes and watchful movements that spoke of training similar to Carter's. "It's fan out," the taller one ordered. "They're up here somewhere." As the men began to search the roof, moving methodically from one potential hiding spot to another, Sophie held Elias tighter, one hand covering his mouth to prevent any sound. The boy's eyes were wide with fear, but he remained absolutely still, seeming to understand the gravity of the situation. Owen crouched beside them, his body tense, ready to move. Hero stood at attention, his eyes never leaving the approaching men, a continuous low growl vibrating in his chest. "Shut that dog up!" the stocky man snapped as they drew closer. "Carter said the mutt was half dead when they found him. Shouldn't be much trouble to finish the job." "The kid's the problem," the taller one replied. Carter said no witnesses this time. Sophie's blood ran cold at the casual way they discussed harming her son. Beside her, she felt Owen shift, his hand moving to the small of his back where, she realized with a jolt, he must have a weapon concealed. "Stay down," he whispered. "No matter what happens, stay down." The men were close now, just on the other side of the air conditioning unit. In seconds, they would round the corner and discover their hiding place. Hero's growl intensified, and then, in a blur of motion, the dog launched himself from their hiding spot, directly at the taller man. The force of Hero's attack sent the man stumbling backward, shouting in surprise and pain as powerful jaws clamped around his wrist. Owen moved simultaneously, tackling the stockier man before he could reach for his own weapon. They crashed to the roof in a tangle of limbs, grappling for control. "Run!" Owen shouted to Sophie. "Now!" Sophie scooped Elias into her arms and darted from their hiding place, heading for the eastern edge of the roof where Owen had said the walkway was located. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of struggle, Hero's fierce growls, the men's shouts, the thud of fists connecting with flesh. "Hero!" Elias cried, looking back over Sophie's shoulder. "We can't leave him!" Sophie's heart was torn, but she kept running. Her first duty was to her son. Hero and Owen were fighting to give them this chance. She couldn't waste it. She reached the edge of the roof and spotted the walkway, a narrow metal bridge connecting their building to the next. It looked old and possibly unstable, but they had no choice. Setting Elias down, she knelt to look him in the eye. "We need to cross this bridge, baby. It's part of our adventure. But you need to be very brave and very careful. Can you do that?" Elias nodded, his small face serious despite the tears on his cheeks. "But Hero and Mr. Owen will catch up with us," Sophie finished, praying it was true. "They're heroes, remember? And heroes always win." Taking her son's hand, Sophie stepped onto the walkway. It swayed slightly under their weight, the metal creaking ominously. Trying not to look down at the alley far below, she guided Elias forward, one careful step at a time. They were halfway across when a gunshot rang out behind them. Sophie froze, her heart seizing in her chest. Who had been shot? Owen? Hero? She wanted desperately to look back, to know what was happening, but Elias's safety had to come first. "Keep going," she urged, her voice shaking. "We're almost there." Another shot, then another, shouting. The sound of police sirens in the distance growing closer. They reached the neighboring roof just as the door to the connecting walkway burst open. Sophie whirled around, pushing Elias behind her, ready to face whatever came through. It was Hero, limping but upright, his fur matted with blood. Whether his own or someone else's, Sophie couldn't tell. The dog crossed the walkway quickly, coming to stand beside them, his body still vibrating with protective energy. "Where's Owen?" Sophie asked, as if the dog could answer. Hero whined, looking back at the open door. The sirens were very close now, the flashing lights visible from the roof. Sophie hesitated, torn between seeking further safety and waiting for Owen. What if he was hurt? What if those gunshots? Her decision was made for her when a figure appeared in the doorway. Owen, his face bloodied, one arm hanging awkwardly at his side, but alive and moving under his own power. "Owen!" she cried, relief flooding through her. He crossed the walkway slowly, clearly in pain. "Police are here," he said as he reached them. "Carter's men are down, one from Hero's attack, one from mine. Neither dead, but they won't be causing trouble for a while." "You're hurt," Sophie said, reaching for him. Owen shook his head dismissively. "Dislocated shoulder, maybe a cracked rib. Nothing serious." Elias broke free from behind Sophie and ran to wrap his arms around Hero's neck. "You saved us," he sobbed. "You're the bravest, best dog ever." Hero licked the boy's tears away, his tail wagging weakly despite his obvious exhaustion and pain. "We should get down to the street," Owen said, wincing as he tried to move his injured arm. "Let the police know where we are." They found the stairwell access for the neighboring building and made their way down, emerging into a scene of controlled chaos. Police cars blocked the street, their lights painting the night in alternating red and blue. Officers were leading the two handcuffed men to separate vehicles, while others secured the area. Detective Malik spotted them immediately and hurried over, his expression shifting from concern to relief. "You're all okay," he said. It wasn't quite a question. "More or less," Owen replied. The detective's gaze moved to Hero, taking in the blood on his fur. "Is he injured?" "We're not sure," Sophie admitted. There was so much happening. Elias, still clinging to Hero's neck, looked up with tear-filled eyes. "He needs a doctor. He got hurt protecting us." "There's an emergency vet clinic about 10 blocks from here," Detective Malik said. "I can have an officer take you right now." While the detective arranged transportation, paramedics examined Owen's injuries, confirming a dislocated shoulder and severe bruising, but no broken bones. They wanted to take him to the hospital, but Owen refused. "Not until I know the dog's okay," he insisted. "I'll get checked out after." The ride to the emergency vet clinic was tense and silent. Elias sat in the back seat with Hero's head in his lap, whispering constant reassurance to the dog. Sophie and Owen flanked them, each lost in their own thoughts about the night's events. And what might have happened if Hero hadn't been there? If Owen hadn't trusted his instincts? If they'd been just a little slower in escaping? At the clinic, a team of veterinarians immediately took Hero into an examination room, gently but firmly telling Elias he would need to wait outside. "But he needs me," Elias protested, his voice breaking. "He'll be scared without me." "The doctors need space to help him," Sophie explained, kneeling to look her son in the eye. "Just like when you go to the doctor, but we'll be right here waiting, and as soon as they say it's okay, you can see him again." Reluctantly, Elias allowed himself to be led to the waiting area. There, still wrapped in the blanket from his bed, he curled up on Sophie's lap, his small body trembling with suppressed sobs. "He was supposed to be safe now," he whispered. "I promised him no one would hurt him again." Sophie's heart broke at the anguish in her son's voice. "You kept that promise as best you could," she told him. "And Hero chose to protect us because he loves us. That was his choice, and it was a brave one." Owen, sitting beside them with his arm now in a sling provided by the paramedics, nodded in agreement. "Hero did exactly what his heart told him to do," he said, "and no one can ask more than that." The wait seemed endless. Hours passed, dawn breaking over the city as they sat vigil in the clinic's waiting room. Detective Malik came and went, updating them on the situation. Both men were in custody, singing like canaries about Carter's operations in exchange for reduced charges. Carter himself was facing additional counts of conspiracy and attempted murder. None of them would be free to threaten Hero or Elias again. Finally, as morning sunlight streamed through the clinic windows, a tired-looking veterinarian emerged from the treatment area. "Family for Hero," she called. Elias was on his feet in an instant, Sophie and Owen right behind him. "Is he okay?" Elias demanded, his voice small but determined. "Is Hero going to live?" The vet's expression softened as she looked down at the anxious child. "Hero is a very strong, very brave dog," she said. "He lost some blood from a knife wound on his side, and he has some deep bruising, but yes, he's going to live. The relief that swept through Sophie was so powerful, she felt her knees weaken. Beside her, she heard Owen exhale sharply, as if he'd been holding his breath. "Can I see him?" Elias asked. The vet nodded. "He's been asking for you, in his own way. Keeps looking at the door every time it opens. But," she added, her tone turning serious, "he needs to rest and recover. The wound will take time to heal, and he'll be on antibiotics and pain medication for a while. We'll take good care of him," Sophie promised. "Whatever he needs." The vet led them to a recovery area, where Hero lay on a padded bed, his side heavily bandaged, an IV line attached to his front leg. Despite his injuries, his tail began to wag the moment he saw them, and he tried to lift his head. "Easy, boy," the vet cautioned. "No sudden movements." Elias approached slowly, his eyes wide with concern. When he reached the bed, he carefully sat beside it and placed his small hand on Hero's head, just between his ears, the spot the dog loved to be scratched. "You did it," Elias whispered. "You saved us, just like a real superhero. Now it's our turn to take care of you." Hero's tail wagged harder, and he managed to lift his head just enough to lick Elias's hand, once before settling back down, his eyes never leaving the boy's face. "When can we take him home?" Sophie asked the vet. "Tomorrow, if all goes well overnight," the vet replied. "We want to keep him on IV antibiotics and fluids for now, make sure there's no infection starting. But he's strong and healthy otherwise, thanks to the good care you've been giving him. That made all the difference in his ability to survive this injury." Owen, who had been hanging back slightly, now moved forward to stand beside Sophie. "You hear that, Hero?" he said softly. "Just one more night, then you can go home to your family." Family. The word hung in the air between them, carrying weight and meaning beyond its simple syllables. They had become a family, forged in crisis, bound by love and sacrifice. "You should get that shoulder properly looked at," Sophie told Owen when the vet had left them. "And we all need rest. It's been a long night." Owen nodded reluctantly. "I'll go to the ER after I make sure you and Elias are somewhere safe. Your apartment ... Is a crime scene now," Sophie finished. "I know." "You can stay at my place," Owen offered. "It's nothing special, but it's secure, and there's plenty of room for both of you." Sophie hesitated, considering their options. They could go to her mother's, but that would involve explanations she wasn't ready to give, questions she didn't have answers for yet. A hotel would be expensive, and after the night they had had, the thought of being among strangers was unappealing. "Okay," she agreed finally, "just until we figure out what's next." "Can I stay here with Hero?" Elias asked, his hand still resting on the dog's head. "I don't want him to be alone." The vet, who had returned with medication for Hero, overheard the question. "I'm afraid we can't allow overnight stays," she said apologetically. "But you can come back first thing in the morning, and I promise we'll take excellent care of Hero until then." Elias looked torn, his desire to stay with Hero warring with his understanding of the rules. Finally, he leaned close to the dog's ear and whispered something that made Hero's tail thump weakly against the bed. "What did you tell him?" Sophie asked as they prepared to leave. "I told him I'd be back tomorrow with his favorite treat," Elias said, "and that he should dream about running in the forest at Mr. Owen's cabin, where no bad guys can find us." The vet assured them they would call immediately if there was any change in Hero's condition, and a police officer was stationed outside the clinic as an extra precaution, though it seemed unlikely that anyone else from Carter's network would attempt anything now. Owen's apartment was exactly as Sophie had imagined it, neat, sparsely furnished, with few personal touches beyond some framed photographs and a collection of books on a shelf. He showed them to the guest room, apologizing for the lack of preparation. "It's perfect," Sophie assured him. "Thank you." While Owen went to have his shoulder properly treated at the ER, Sophie helped Elias shower and change into a t-shirt Owen had provided, which hung like a nightgown on the boy's small frame. Despite the excitement and danger of the night, Elias was exhausted, and he fell asleep almost as soon as his head touched the pillow. Sophie watched him sleep for a long moment, overwhelmed with love and gratitude that he was safe, that they had all survived the night's events. Then she went to the kitchen to make coffee, needing the ritual and the caffeine to help process everything that had happened. She was on her second cup when Owen returned, his arm properly immobilized in a sling, his face pale with exhaustion, but relieved. "How's the shoulder?" she asked as he eased himself onto a kitchen chair. It'll heal, he said simply. How's Elias? Asleep. It's amazing how resilient kids can be. Owen nodded. And you? How are you holding up after all this? Sophie considered the question, realizing she hadn't really checked in with her own feelings since the nightmare began. I don't know, she admitted. Grateful we're all alive, terrified when I think about what could have happened, angry that these men targeted a child and a dog just to cover their crimes. All completely normal reactions, Owen assured her. It's a lot to process. I keep thinking about Hero, Sophie continued, how he didn't hesitate, not for a second. He could have hidden, could have run away from the danger. No one would have blamed him after everything he's been through, but instead, he put himself between those men and Elias. That's who he is, Owen said simply. Some dogs are born protectors, and no amount of abuse can change that core nature. Carter tried to break him, to turn him mean or make him give up, but he couldn't. Hero's spirit was stronger than the cruelty. Sophie felt tears well in her eyes. He saved us, all of us, and now he's lying in a clinic, hurt because of it. He'll recover, Owen reminded her. The vet said so, and when he does, he'll have a family that loves him and appreciates exactly who he is. Family. There was that word again, warming Sophie from the inside. You're part of that family now, you know, she said softly. Whether you meant to be or not. Owen looked surprised, then thoughtful. I'd like that, he said finally. If you're sure. Hero's sure, Sophie replied with a small smile. And Elias adores you. As for me, she paused, searching for the right words. I've learned to be careful about who I trust, especially when it comes to Elias. But you've proven yourself in every way that matters. Owen reached across the table with his good hand, hesitantly taking hers. Thank you, he said simply, for trusting me. They sat like that for a long moment, connected by touch and by the shared experience of the past weeks. Then Sophie yawned, the adrenaline that had kept her going finally fading. You should rest, Owen told her. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day, getting Hero home and figuring out next steps. Sophie nodded, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. Good night, Owen, and thank you for everything. Good night, Sophie, he replied softly. The next day dawned bright and clear, a perfect spring morning that seemed at odds with the drama of the previous night. Elias was up early, eager to return to the clinic and bring Hero home. Do you think he's feeling better? He asked anxiously as they drove across town. Do you think he missed us? I'm sure he did, Sophie assured him, and the vet said he was doing well when they called this morning. At the clinic, they found Hero awake and alert, his bandage changed to a smaller one, the IV removed. When he saw them, his entire body wiggled with joy, his tail thumping rhythmically against the bed. Hero! Elias cried, rushing to the dog's side. We came back, just like I promised. The vet reviewed care instructions with Sophie and Owen, keeping the wound clean, administering antibiotics and pain medication, limiting activity until the stitches healed. He'll need to take it easy for a few weeks, she emphasized. No running, no jumping, no roughhousing. We'll make sure he rests, Sophie promised, though she wondered how they would explain the restrictions to Elias, who was already whispering to Hero about all the games they would play once he was better. Getting Hero into Owen's truck was a challenge, as the dog was still weak and sore, but with careful maneuvering, they managed. Hero settled in the back seat with Elias, his head in the boy's lap, his eyes closing contentedly as small fingers stroked his fur. Where to? Owen asked as he started the engine. My place again? Or... He left the question open-ended, and Sophie realized they hadn't discussed what would happen next. Their apartment was likely still a crime scene, and even if it wasn't, the thought of returning there after last night's events was unsettling. Actually, she said slowly, an idea forming, I was thinking we might go back to the cabin, just for a little while. It would be good for Hero to recover somewhere quiet, away from the city noise and stress. Owen's face brightened. I think that's a great idea. The fresh air would do him good, and there's plenty of space for him to rest comfortably. Can we, Mama? Elias asked eagerly from the back seat. Please, Hero loves the forest. Sophie smiled at her son's enthusiasm. Yes, we can, but just for a week or so. You'll miss a few days of school, but under the circumstances, I think your teachers will understand. The drive to the cabin was peaceful, a marked contrast to the chaos of the previous night. Hero slept most of the way, his body needing rest to heal, while Elias chattered excitedly about all the things they would show Hero once he was better: the lake, the best climbing trees, the spot where they'd seen deer tracks on their last visit. As they turned onto the dirt road leading to the cabin, Sophie felt a sense of homecoming that surprised her. They'd only spent one weekend here, yet somehow it had imprinted itself on her heart as a place of safety and peace. The cabin looked just as they had left it, rustic, welcoming, surrounded by the vibrant green of spring forest. Owen carried Hero inside, gently settling him on a soft blanket near the fireplace. "Home, sweet home," he said, scratching behind the dog's ears. "At least for a while." "Home," Elias echoed, dropping to his knees beside Hero. "Do you like it here, boy? Is it good to be back?" Hero's tail thumped against the floor in what seemed like agreement, his eyes moving from Elias to Sophie to Owen, as if confirming that his entire family was here, safe and together. The weeks that followed were a time of healing, not just for Hero's physical wound, but for the less visible scars all of them carried. They fell into a gentle routine, each day marked by small victories and quiet moments of connection. Hero grew stronger day by day, his wound healing cleanly, his energy returning. By the third week, he was able to take short walks in the woods, always with Elias by his side, always returning to the cabin, a little tired, but visibly content. One evening, as Sophie sat on the porch watching the sunset, Owen joined her, 2 mugs of coffee in his hands. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, offering her one of the mugs. Sophie accepted it with a smile. "I was just thinking about how much has changed in such a short time. A few months ago, it was just Elias and me, struggling to get by in that tiny apartment. Now, ... Now you have a dog who thinks he's a superhero and an ex-cop who can't seem to stay away," Owen finished, his tone light but his eyes serious. "Now we have a family," Sophie corrected gently. "Different from what I imagined, but perfect in its own way." Owen's expression softened. "I've been meaning to talk to you about that, about the future." Sophie's heart skipped a beat. "Oh? My lease is up next month," he said, looking out at the forest rather than at her. "And I was thinking, this cabin sits empty most of the time. It seems a waste, especially when Hero obviously thrives here." "What are you suggesting?" Sophie asked, though she thought she knew, hope rising in her chest. Owen turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers directly. "Move here, you and Elias and Hero. I know it's a longer commute to the city for work, but the schools in the nearby town are good, and there's so much space for Elias to play, for Hero to run once he's fully healed. And you?" Sophie asked softly. "Where do you fit in this picture?" "Wherever you want me to," Owen replied simply. "I care about you, Sophie, about Elias and Hero too, more than I expected to, more than I thought I could after losing my wife. But I understand if it's too soon, or if you prefer to keep things as they are." Sophie considered his words, thinking about all they'd been through together, about the way Owen had entered their lives at exactly the moment they needed him most. She thought about Hero, who had taught them all about resilience and trust and the capacity for love even after terrible hurt. "It's not too soon," she said finally, "and I don't want to keep things as they are. I want to move forward, together." The smile that spread across Owen's face was like sunrise breaking through clouds. He reached for her hand, and she gave it willingly, feeling a sense of rightness, of completion. Inside the cabin, they could hear Elias's voice as he read a story to Hero, the dog likely curled up beside the boy's bed, as he had been every night since they arrived, the sound wrapped around them like a blanket, warm and comforting. "I never thought I'd find this again," Owen said quietly. "A home, a family." "Neither did I," Sophie admitted. "But sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. Like a German shepherd chained to a dumpster, left to die. Like a 4-year-old boy who heard a cry no one else could hear. Like a retired cop who couldn't look away from injustice. 3 broken pieces that somehow fit together to create something whole and beautiful." Months later, on a golden autumn day, Hero raced through the fallen leaves of the forest, fully healed and vibrant with health and happiness. Elias chased after him, laughing as the dog playfully dodged his attempts to catch him. Sophie and Owen watched from the porch of the cabin, their home now, filled with the comfortable clutter of family life. A swing hung from a nearby oak tree, built by Owen for Elias's 5th birthday. A large padded dog bed occupied a corner of the living room, though Hero rarely used it, preferring to sleep beside Elias's bed or on the couch when he could get away with it. "They've come so far," Sophie remarked, leaning against Owen's shoulder. "Both of them?" Owen nodded, his arm around her waist. "It's amazing what love can heal." As if sensing they were talking about him, Hero looked up from his game with Elias and bounded toward the porch, his tail waving like a flag. He reached Sophie first, pressing his body against her legs in greeting, then moved to Owen, accepting a scratch behind the ears with a contented sigh. "Good boy," Owen told him. "The very best boy." Elias joined them on the porch, his cheeks flushed from running, his eyes bright with happiness. "Hero's teaching me to track squirrels," he announced. "But they're too fast for me." "Too fast for most humans," Owen assured him, "but you're getting better every day." Elias beamed at the praise, then flopped down on the porch beside Hero, one arm draped over the dog's back in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. Sophie looked at the three of them, her son, her dog, her partner, and felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. From the darkest night had come the brightest day. From an act of cruelty had grown a family bound by love. Hero looked up at her, his eyes clear and wise, no longer haunted by his past. In them, Sophie saw complete trust, absolute love, and the quiet confidence of a dog who knew without a doubt that he was finally, truly home. As the sun began to set over the forest, painting the world in shades of gold and amber, Sophie made a silent promise to the universe. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they faced, they would face them together, the four of them against the world. And that, she knew, would always be enough. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales of hope and rescue. Drop a comment below to share your own pet rescue stories. We'd love to hear how a special animal changed your life forever.